For 30 years, Desmond Blake never cried. Not when he built his empire. Not when he crushed his enemies. Not even when he buried the guilt of watching his sister die in his arms. But tonight, staring at a starving 12-year-old girl clutching a handmade bracelet, tears burned his eyes. Because that bracelet was impossible. His sister had been dead for decades. Yet here it was again. Same colors. Same pattern. Same desperate hope woven into every thread. The girl whispered 6 words that shattered him completely. "Please don't let my sister die hungry." And Desmond Blake, the man who feared nothing, suddenly feared everything. Because saving these girls might destroy them all. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video, share and subscribe. Also tell us in comment where you are watching from. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, Barbados or anywhere? We wanna know. The city never sleeps. That's what people say. But tonight, as the clouds hung low and heavy over the streets, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Emanuela stood at the edge of the crowded shopping center entrance, her small fingers wrapped tightly around something precious. Something that might be the difference between her little sister eating tonight or going to bed with an empty stomach again. She was 12 years old. Just 12. But her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived 100 lifetimes. The evening rush was in full swing. Men in expensive suits rushed past her without a glance. Women in designer heels clicked by, their shopping bags swinging carelessly. Children her age walked hand in hand with their parents, laughing, complaining about homework, begging for ice cream. Emanuela watched them all. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel jealousy. She just felt invisible. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but that wasn't what scared her. She could handle being hungry. She had done it before. Many times. But Sharon, her 8-year-old sister, was waiting for her behind the mall. Waiting with hope in her eyes. Waiting for the promise Emanuela had made this morning. "I'll get us food today, Sharon. I promise. Just trust me." Emanuela looked down at the bracelet in her hand. She had spent 3 days making it. Every knot was perfect. Every bead was placed with care. The colors were bright, cheerful, beautiful. Red for courage. Blue for hope. Yellow for the sun they prayed would shine on them again someday. She had made bracelets before, but this one was special. This one had to work. It had to. Her legs trembled as she stood there, watching the crowd. She knew what she had to do. She had to approach someone. Someone kind. Someone who might stop for just a moment and see her. Really see her. But who? Most people walked past like she was part of the wall. Some looked at her with pity but kept moving. Others frowned, as if her presence ruined the beauty of their expensive shopping trip. Emanuela's throat tightened. She blinked back tears. She couldn't cry. Not now. Sharon needed her to be strong. Then, the air changed. The crowd shifted, moving aside like a wave parting for something powerful. Emanuela heard the low rumble of engines, smooth and expensive. She looked up and saw them. 3 sleek black cars, shining under the street lights, moving in perfect formation. They weren't just cars. They were statements. Power. Wealth. Control. The cars pulled up right in front of the shopping center entrance. Security guards immediately straightened. Store workers peeked out from inside. People whispered and pointed. Emanuela's heart pounded. She should move. She should step back. These weren't people she could approach. These were the kind of people who lived in a different world. But her feet stayed planted. The middle car door opened. And he stepped out. Desmond Blake. Even Emanuela, who barely had access to television or newspapers, knew that name. Everyone did. He was one of the richest men in the country. Maybe one of the richest in the whole world. People said he was brilliant. People said he was ruthless. People said he never smiled, never showed mercy, never looked back at anyone he left behind. He was tall, dressed in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut through steel. His face was hard, carved from stone. His eyes swept across the crowd with the cold efficiency of someone who had seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Emanuela's instinct screamed at her to run. To hide. To disappear. But then she thought of Sharon. Sweet Sharon, sitting behind the mall with her thin arms wrapped around her knees, trusting that her big sister would come back with food. Emanuela's fingers tightened around the bracelet. Before she could stop herself, before fear could freeze her completely, she took a step forward. Then another. Then another. The crowd noticed. Whispers grew louder. Security guards moved toward her, hands raised to stop her. But Emanuela kept walking. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. Her hands shook. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She was 10 feet away from him now. 5 feet. 3. Desmond Blake was about to walk into the shopping center. His bodyguards surrounded him like a fortress. One of them stepped forward to block Emanuela. But she found her voice. Small. Trembling. But clear. Please. Desmond stopped. He didn't turn around. Not yet. But he stopped. Emanuela's voice broke, but she pushed the words out anyway. Please, don't let my sister go to sleep hungry tonight. The world went silent. The crowd froze. The bodyguards exchanged confused glances. Even the wind seemed to pause. Slowly, very slowly, Desmond Blake turned around. His eyes found hers. Cold. Sharp. Unreassurable. Emanuela felt her knees weaken, but she refused to back down. She had come this far. Sharon was counting on her. With trembling hands, she opened her palm and held up the bracelet. The tiny handmade bracelet, woven with red, blue, and yellow threads, colorful beads catching the light. Simple. Innocent. Beautiful in the way only something made with pure hope could be. I'm not begging, sir, Emanuela whispered, her voice barely audible. I just want you to buy this. So I can get food for my sister. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Desmond Blake's face changed. Not with anger. Not with annoyance. With something else. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like pain. He stared at the bracelet as if he had seen a ghost. His jaw tightened. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, slowly curled into fists. His breathing changed, just slightly, but enough for Emanuela to notice. The bodyguards looked at each other, confused. This wasn't normal. Their boss never stopped. Never engaged. Never showed emotion. But right now, Desmond Blake looked like a man who had been struck by lightning. He took a step closer to Emanuela. Then another. The crowd held its breath. Emanuela's heart raced. She didn't know if she had made a terrible mistake or a miracle. Desmond's voice came out low, almost rough, as if he hadn't used it to speak gently in years. Where did you get that bracelet? Emanuela swallowed hard. I made it, sir. I made it myself. I make them to sell so my sister and I can eat. His eyes never left the bracelet. How old are you? 12, sir. And your sister? 8, sir. His jaw clenched tighter. Something was happening inside him. Something was breaking. Something was remembering. Where are your parents? Emanuela's eyes dropped to the ground. Gone, sir. It's just me and Sharon now. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Then Desmond did something that made everyone gasp. He reached out and gently took the bracelet from Emanuela's hand. He held it up to the light, examining every thread, every bead, every careful knot. His hands were shaking. Actually shaking. One of the bodyguards whispered, Sir, we should. Quiet, Desmond said softly, but with such authority that the man immediately fell silent. Emanuela didn't dare move. She didn't dare breathe. Finally, Desmond looked at her again. His eyes were different now. Still hard, but with something else swimming beneath the surface. Something human. This bracelet, he said slowly, his voice tight with emotion he was clearly fighting to control. Where is your sister right now? Hope flickered in Emanuela's chest like a tiny, fragile flame. Behind them all, sir. I didn't want her standing in the crowd. It's safer if she waits for me. Desmond stood perfectly still, the bracelet clutched in his hand. The crowd watched. The bodyguards waited. Time seemed to stop. Then, Desmond spoke words that would change everything. Show me. Emanuela blinked. Sir. Show me where your sister is. The bodyguards immediately protested. Sir, that's not safe. We haven't checked. Desmond raised one hand, and they all fell silent. His eyes never left Emanuela's face. I give you my word, he said quietly. You're safe. Both of you. Now show me. Emanuela's mind raced. This was Desmond Blake. The man people feared. The man who never showed kindness. The man who crushed competitors without blinking. But right now, looking into his eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw someone in pain. Someone remembering. Someone who looked at her bracelet like it was a key that had unlocked a door he'd kept sealed for years. She nodded slowly. Okay. Follow me. As Emanuela turned and began walking toward the back of the mall, the crowd erupted in whispers. Is he really following that girl? What's happening? Someone should call the police. This is insane. But Desmond ignored them all. He followed Emanuela, his bodyguards hurrying to keep up, confusion written all over their faces. Emanuela's heart pounded with every step. She was leading one of the most powerful men in the country through a crowded shopping area, toward a dark alley, where her vulnerable little sister waited alone. What if this was a mistake? What if he hurt them? What if she had just put Sharon in terrible danger? But something in his eyes when he looked at that bracelet told her this was different. This was real. They walked past the bright store windows, past the restaurants filled with families eating dinner, past the security guards who watched with wide eyes. They reached the back of the mall, where the lighting was dimmer, where the crowd disappeared, where the forgotten corners of the city existed. And there, in a small shaded area beside a dumpster, sat Sharon. She was curled up gently against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees, her head resting on her arms. She looked so small, so fragile, so heartbreakingly young. When she heard footsteps, she lifted her head. Her eyes brightened when she saw Emanuela. Did it work? Sharon asked hopefully, her voice weak from hunger. Did someone buy the bracelet? Then she saw the man standing behind her sister. The tall man in the expensive suit. The man who looked like he belonged in a castle, not in a dirty alley. Sharon scrambled to her feet, fear flashing across her face. She moved closer to Emanuela, grabbing her sister's hand. Emanuela knelt down beside her. It's okay, Sharon. This nice man wants to help us. Desmond stood frozen at the entrance to the alley, staring at the two girls. His face had gone completely pale. His breathing was shallow. His hands, still clutching the bracelet, were shaking harder now. One of the bodyguards whispered urgently, "Sir, we should leave. This isn't." "No," Desmond said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, I need to. I need to." He couldn't finish the sentence. Because looking at these two girls, huddled together in the shadows, hungry but dignified, scared but brave, reminded him of something he had spent decades trying to forget. A dirt road. A small house. A little girl with bright eyes and a handmade bracelet. His sister. His baby sister. The one he had promised to protect. The one he had failed. Sharon took a tentative step forward. Despite her fear, despite her hunger, despite everything, she looked up at Desmond and whispered, "Sir, we didn't want to cause trouble. We just wanted bread." That single sentence shattered something inside Desmond Blake. He closed his eyes, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. When he opened them again, they were glistening with tears he refused to let fall. "How long," he asked hoarsely, "have you two been living like this?" Emanuela and Sharon exchanged glances. 6 months, sir," Emanuela said quietly. "Since our aunt got sick and couldn't take care of us anymore." "And you've been surviving by selling bracelets?" "Yes, sir. And sometimes I clean cars in parking lots. Sometimes people give us leftover food from restaurants. We manage." "You manage," Desmond repeated, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "You're 12 years old. She's 8. And you manage." He looked at the bracelet in his hand again. Really looked at it. Every careful knot. Every perfectly placed bead. The work of a child who refused to beg, who chose dignity over desperation. Exactly like his sister would have done. A memory slammed into him with the force of a truck. 30 years ago. A different city. A different life. His sister, Isabella, just 10 years old, pressing a bracelet into his hand. "I made this for you," she had said, smiling through the dirt on her face. "So you never forget me when you become rich and famous." He had laughed. "I'll never forget you, Bella. I promise. I'll take care of you forever." But 3 months later, she was gone. Taken by an illness they couldn't afford to treat. Stolen by poverty. Erased by a world that didn't care about children who had nothing. He had become rich. Powerful. Untouchable. But he had never forgiven himself. He had never stopped seeing her face. And now, standing in this alley, looking at Emanuela and Sharon, he saw her again. He saw the child he couldn't save. The promise he couldn't keep. The guilt that had turned him into the cold, ruthless man everyone feared. "Sir." Emanuela's voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you okay?" Desmond realized his face was wet. He was crying. For the first time in 30 years, Desmond Blake was crying. He quickly wiped his eyes, trying to regain control. His bodyguard stood in shocked silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer. Raw. Do you girls like pizza? Sharon's eyes widened. Pizza? Real pizza? Emanuela squeezed her sister's hand, cautious. Sir, we can't accept charity. If you want to help, we can work. We can clean. We can. I know, Desmond interrupted gently. But humor me. Just for tonight. Let me buy you dinner. Emanuela studied his face. She saw something there that made her believe him. Something genuine. Something broken but trying to heal. Okay, she whispered. Just for tonight. Desmond turned to his head bodyguard. Bring the car around. Sir, are you sure? Now. The guard nodded and quickly spoke into his radio. Within minutes, one of the black cars pulled up at the entrance to the alley. Desmond gestured to the girls. Come. You're safe. I promise. Emanuela helped Sharon walk toward the car. They both stared at it with wide eyes. They had never been in a car like this. They had never even been close to one. A bodyguard opened the door. The interior was like something from a dream. Leather seats. Soft lighting. A smell of expensive cologne and luxury. Sharon looked at Emanuela with fear and excitement mixed in her eyes. Emanuela nodded, and they climbed in together, sitting close, holding hands. Desmond got in after them, sitting across from them. The door closed, sealing them in silence. As the car pulled away from the mall, Emanuela glanced back at the place where they had spent so many evenings, hoping for kindness from strangers. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. For better, or for worse. The car glided through the city streets in silence. Sharon pressed her face against the window, watching the lights blur past. She had never ridden in a car this smooth. It felt like floating. Emanuela kept glancing at Desmond, trying to understand him. Why was he doing this? What did he want from them? But Desmond sat with his eyes closed, the bracelet still clutched in his hand, his jaw tight with emotion. Finally, the car stopped. They were in front of a restaurant. Not just any restaurant. It was elegant, with tall glass windows and a sign that glowed with golden light. The name on the sign read Blake's Essence. You own this place? Emanuela whispered. Desmond opened his eyes. I do. The door opened, and they stepped out. A man in a chef's uniform stood at the entrance, his eyes going wide when he saw his boss. Mr. Blake. We weren't expecting you tonight. We're closed for cleaning. I know, Desmond said calmly. But I need you to prepare food for my guests. The chef looked at Emanuela and Sharon, confusion flickering across his face. But he was smart enough not to ask questions. Of course, sir. Right away. Desmond led the girls inside. The restaurant was stunning. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light. The tables were set with white cloths and sparkling silverware. Everything gleamed. Emanuela and Sharon stood frozen, feeling completely out of place. But Desmond walked to a table near the window and pulled out 2 chairs himself. Sit, he said gently. The girls exchanged glances and slowly sat down. Desmond sat across from them, folding his hands on the table. What do you like to eat? He asked. Sharon's voice was barely a whisper. Anything, sir. We're not picky. Desmond's eyes softened. But if you could have anything in the world right now, what would it be? Sharon thought hard, her little face scrunched in concentration. Chicken. With rice. And maybe some juice. Emanuela added quickly, but just a little, sir. We don't want to waste. You won't waste anything, Desmond said firmly. Tonight, you eat until you're full. No limits. No worries. Understood. The girls nodded, tears pricking their eyes. Desmond called the chef over and ordered enough food for 10 people. Chicken, rice, pasta, salads, bread, desserts, juice, and water. As they waited for the food, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Emanuela broke it. Sir, why are you being so kind to us? Desmond looked at her for a long moment. Then he slowly placed the bracelet on the table between them. Because, he said quietly, a long time ago, someone I loved very much made me a bracelet just like this. Sharon leaned forward. Really? Who? My little sister. Her name was Isabella. Where is she now? Sharon asked innocently. The pain that crossed Desmond's face was so raw, so immediate, that Emanuela immediately reached out and touched his hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. You don't have to answer. Desmond looked down at her small hand on his. It was the first time anyone had touched him with kindness in years. She died, he said simply. When she was just a little older than you, Sharon. I was 14. We were poor, like you. And when she got sick, we couldn't afford a doctor. I tried everything. I begged. I stole. I did everything I could think of. His voice cracked. But it wasn't enough. She died in my arms, asking me if I would keep my promise to take care of her. The table fell silent. Sharon's eyes filled with tears. Even though she was just 8, she understood loss. She understood pain. I'm sorry, she whispered. Desmond smiled sadly. After that, I promised myself I would never be powerless again. I would never let poverty take someone I loved. So I worked. I fought. I clawed my way to the top. And I became this. He gestured to himself, to the restaurant, to everything around them. Rich. Powerful. Feared. He looked at the bracelet again. But I've never been able to forgive myself. Because all the money in the world couldn't bring her back. Emanuela's voice was soft but steady. She would be proud of you, sir. Look at everything you've built. Desmond shook his head. Would she? I've spent 30 years building an empire. But I've also spent 30 years pushing people away. I don't have friends. I don't have family. I have employees, business partners, people who fear me. He looked at the girls with something close to desperation. But I don't have anyone who looks at me the way you two look at each other. With trust. With love. Sharon stood up from her chair, walked around the table, and without warning, hugged Desmond. He froze, completely shocked. You're not a bad person, Sharon said into his chest. Bad people don't cry. Bad people don't feed hungry kids. You're just sad. And that's okay. Desmond's arms slowly, hesitantly, wrapped around the little girl. And for the second time that night, he cried. Not the silent tears from before. These were deep, shaking sobs. 30 years of grief pouring out in the arms of a child he had just met. Emanuela watched with tears streaming down her own face. When Desmond finally pulled away, he quickly wiped his eyes, embarrassed. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. That was unprofessional. That was human, Emanuela corrected gently. Before anyone could say more, the chef arrived with the food. Plate after plate after plate. The table was covered with dishes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Sharon's eyes went wide as saucers. Is this all for us? Every bite, Desmond confirmed. The girls waited, looking at him for permission. He nodded. Eat. They began slowly, carefully, as if the food might disappear if they moved too fast. But as they tasted the chicken, the rice, the fresh bread, their control broke. They were so hungry. So desperately, painfully hungry. Desmond watched them eat, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. He had fed politicians, celebrities, royalty. But nothing had ever felt as important as feeding these two girls. Halfway through the meal, Emanuela suddenly stopped eating. She put down her fork and looked at Desmond with serious eyes. Sir, we can't eat all this without paying somehow. That's wrong. Desmond raised an eyebrow. Wrong? My mother taught us, Emanuela said firmly. Never take more than you can give back. If we eat all this food, we need to do something in return. Sharon nodded, swallowing her bite of chicken. We can clean tables. Or wash dishes. Or sweep floors. Desmond stared at them, absolutely stunned. Here were two children who had nothing. Who were starving. Who had every reason to take whatever they could get. And they were refusing charity. They were demanding to maintain their dignity. It reminded him so much of Isabella that his chest physically hurt. What if, he said slowly, I gave you both something different? Emanuela tilted her head. Like what? What if I gave you a place where you never have to worry about food again? Where you have warm beds? Where you can go to school? Where you're safe? The girls froze. Sharon's fork clattered to her plate. Emanuela's voice was barely audible. Why would you do that for us? Desmond looked at the bracelet one more time. Then he looked at the girls with eyes full of grief and hope. Because someone once asked me the same question, and I failed her. The restaurant went completely silent. Emanuela and Sharon stared at Desmond, not knowing what to say. Not knowing if this was real or a dream. Desmond's phone suddenly buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. It was his personal doctor. Calling this late meant it was urgent. Excuse me, he said, standing quickly. I need to take this. He walked to the corner of the restaurant and answered. Yes? The conversation was brief. But with every word, Desmond's face grew harder. Colder. When he hung up, he stood there for a long moment, his back to the girls. His hands were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from emotion. It was from fear. He returned to the table slowly, his expression unreassurable. Is everything okay? Emanuela asked. Desmond didn't answer right away. He sat down, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The doctor had just reminded him of something he'd been trying to forget. A rare genetic condition. Something he carried. Something that could be passed on to anyone living in close proximity to him over time through environmental factors science still didn't fully understand. It was why he never let anyone get close. Why he never had a family of his own. Why he built walls so high that no one could climb them. If he brought these girls into his home, if he became their guardian, if he gave them the future they deserved, he might be giving them a future filled with medical complications. Pain. Suffering. The very thing he swore to protect people from. Emanuela saw the change in his face. Sir? What's wrong? Desmond forced a smile. Nothing. Finish your food. But Sharon wasn't fooled. She had learned to read adults. To know when they were lying. You're scared, she said quietly. Desmond looked at her, surprised. What? You're scared of something. I can tell. Emanuela watched him carefully. Did we do something wrong? No, Desmond said quickly. No, you did everything right. His voice cracked on the last word. That's why this is so hard. The girls didn't understand, but they felt the shift. They felt the walls coming back up. They continued eating, but the joy was gone. Replaced by a creeping fear that this magical night was about to end. And they were right. Because in Desmond Blake's mind, a war was raging. Save these girls, or protect them from himself. Give them hope, or spare them from a poisoned future. Be the hero, or remain the monster. The food grew cold as they all sat in heavy silence, the weight of an impossible decision crushing the air between them. After dinner, Desmond called his driver. The car pulled up within seconds, gleaming under the restaurant lights. The girls stood outside, full for the first time in weeks, but confused by the heaviness that had settled over their rescuer. Get in, Desmond said quietly. I'll take you somewhere safe. Emanuela hesitated. Something in his voice had changed. The warmth from earlier was gone, replaced by distance. Professional coldness. Sir, where are you taking us? To prepare rooms for you. At my guest residence. Sharon's face lit up. Really? We get to stay with you? But Desmond couldn't look at her. We'll see. Those two words carried so much weight that even Sharon's smile faded. They rode in silence through the glittering city. The streets were alive with people enjoying their evenings, laughing, living, unaware of the silent battle happening inside the black car. Emanuela watched Desmond's face in the dim light. His jaw was clenched. His hands were fists. His eyes stared out the window, but she could tell he wasn't seeing anything. He was fighting himself. Sir, she said softly. If this is too much trouble, we understand. You've already done so much. More than anyone ever has. Desmond's eyes closed. It's not about trouble. Then what is it about? He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it took her breath away. It's about whether I have the right to give you hope, when I might be taking away your future. Emanuela frowned, not understanding. What do you mean? But Desmond didn't answer. He turned back to the window. The car pulled up to a massive estate on the edge of the city. Gates opened automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with trees and lights. Sharon pressed her face against the window. Is this your house? One of them, Desmond said quietly. The main house loomed ahead, a modern mansion of glass and steel that looked like something from a dream. But the car didn't stop there. Instead, it continued to a smaller building at the back of the property. The guest house. Still luxurious. Still beautiful. But separate. Always separate. They stepped out of the car. A woman in a neat uniform stood waiting at the entrance. She smiled warmly at the girls. Mr. Blake called ahead, she said kindly. I've prepared 2 rooms with fresh clothes, toiletries, and everything you'll need. Sharon's eyes went wide. 2 whole rooms? Just for us? The woman laughed gently. Just for you. She led them inside. The guest house was stunning. Soft carpets. Warm lighting. Furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Emanuela and Sharon stood frozen in the entrance, afraid to step further and ruin something. Desmond watched them from the doorway, his expression unreassurable. The woman showed them the first room. A queen-size bed with fluffy pillows. A window overlooking the garden. A bathroom with a bathtub that sparkled. Sharon gasped. "This is for me." "All yours, sweetheart," the woman said. She showed them the second room, equally beautiful. Then the kit Tammy, stocked with food. The living room with a television bigger than any they'd ever seen. "If you need anything at all," the woman said, "just press this button. Someone will come immediately." She demonstrated a small panel on the wall, then smiled at the girls one more time before leaving. Now it was just Desmond, Emanuela, and Sharon standing in the middle of luxury they couldn't comprehend. Sharon ran to Desmond and hugged his legs. "Thank you. Thank you so much. This is the best day of my whole life." Desmond's hand hovered over her head, hesitating, before finally resting gently on her hair. "You're welcome," he whispered. But Emanuela saw it. The way his hand trembled. The way his jaw clenched. The way he looked at Sharon like he was memorizing her face. Like he was saying goodbye. "Sir," Emanuela said carefully. "What happens tomorrow?" Desmond pulled away from Sharon gently. "Tomorrow, you rest. You eat. You recover. And then." He stopped. "And then?" Emanuela pressed. Desmond walked to the window, staring out at the dark garden. "And then we figure out what's best for you." "What do you mean? Isn't staying here what's best?" He didn't turn around. "I don't know yet." Sharon walked over to him, confused and scared by his tone. "Don't you want us to stay?" That question broke something in him. He knelt down so he was eye level with her. "I want nothing more," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But what I want and what's right aren't always the same thing." "I don't understand," Sharon whispered. "I know." He touched her cheek gently. "And I'm sorry for that." He stood up and walked toward the door. "Wait." Emanuela called out. "You're leaving?" "I have some calls to make. Some decisions to think through. But you're safe here. I promise." "When will we see you again?" Sharon asked, her voice small and frightened. Desmond paused at the door, his back to them. "Soon." And then he was gone. The door closed softly behind him. Emanuela and Sharon stood alone in the beautiful guest house, surrounded by luxury but feeling emptier than they had in the alley. "Emanuela," Sharon whispered. "Is he going to send us away?" Emanuela pulled her sister close. "I don't know, Sharon. I don't know." Outside, Desmond sat in his car, head in his hands. His phone rang. His assistant. "Sir, I've contacted the top pediatric specialists in the country. They can consult tomorrow about the condition. About whether it's safe for children to." "I know what they'll say," Desmond interrupted. "They'll say there's a risk. They always say there's a risk. But sir, maybe this time. Maybe isn't good enough." Desmond's voice cracked. "These girls have already lost everything. I can't give them hope just to take it away again. I can't be the reason they suffer." Silence on the other end of the line. "What do you want me to do, sir?" Desmond closed his eyes. "Find them a good foster family. One with resources. One that can give them everything they need. Without the complications I bring." "Sir, are you sure?" "Just do it," Desmond said, his voice hollow. "Do it before I change my mind." He hung up and sat in the darkness, the two bracelets on his lap. Inside the guest house, Emanuela helped Sharon get ready for bed. They took warm baths, the first in months. They put on clean pajamas that were softer than anything they'd ever worn. Sharon climbed into her bed, sinking into the mattress like it was a cloud. "Emanuela," she said sleepily. "Do you think we're dreaming?" Emanuela sat on the edge of her bed. "Maybe. But it's a nice dream. What if it ends?" Emanuela didn't answer. She couldn't. Sharon's eyes filled with tears. "I like him, Emanuela. Mr. Desmond. He's sad, but he's kind. I don't want to leave." "I know, baby. I know. Why does it feel like everyone who's nice to us always leaves?" That question cut deeper than any knife. Emanuela lay down next to her sister, holding her close. "Because the world isn't fair. But we have each other. We'll always have each other." Sharon cried herself to sleep in Emanuela's arms. And Emanuela stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of this beautiful room, feeling more trapped than she ever did on the streets. Because hope, she realized, was more dangerous than hunger. Hunger just made you weak. But hope? Hope could destroy you. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, waking Emanuela gently. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. The restaurant. The car. The mansion. Desmond. She sat up quickly, looking around. Sharon was still asleep, peaceful for the first time in months. Emanuela got up and walked to the window. The garden outside was breathtaking. Flowers in every color. A fountain sparkling in the morning light. Birds singing. It looked like paradise. But paradise always had a price. A soft knock on the door made her turn. "Come in," she called quietly. The kind woman from last night entered with a breakfast cart. The smell of fresh bread, eggs, fruit, and juice filled the room. "Good morning, dear. I'm Mrs. Tammy. I manage this property. I thought you girls might be hungry." "Thank you," Emanuela said, but her voice was flat. Mrs. Tammy noticed. She set up the food on a small table and then sat down, gesturing for Emanuela to join her. "You're worried," she said gently. Emanuela nodded, sitting down. "He's going to send us away, isn't he?" Mrs. Tammy sighed. "I don't know what Mr. Blake will decide. But I do know he's wrestling with something very difficult." "What could be so difficult?" "We're not asking for much. Just a place to stay. We'll work. We'll help. We won't be trouble." "Oh, sweetheart, it's not about that." Mrs. Tammy reached across and took Emanuela's hand. "Mr. Blake hasn't let anyone close to him in 30 years. Not since his sister died. He's terrified of caring about people because he's terrified of losing them. But we're not going to die. We're fine." "Are you?" Mrs. Tammy asked gently. "When was the last time you saw a doctor? When was the last time you had a proper meal before yesterday? You're strong, Emanuela. Incredibly strong. But you're also 12 years old, and you've been living on the streets for 6 months." Emanuela's eyes filled with tears. "We've been managing." "I know you have. And that's remarkable. But Mr. Blake sees 2 little girls who remind him of the sister he couldn't save. And he's absolutely terrified that if he lets himself love you, he'll fail you too." "But he won't. We're not asking him to save us from anything. We just need a chance." Mrs. Tammy smiled sadly. "The heart doesn't work that way, dear. Fear doesn't listen to logic." Sharon woke up and immediately ran to the food, eyes wide with joy. "Is this all for us?" "Every bite," Mrs. Tammy said warmly. "Eat up, sweetheart." As the girls ate, Mrs. Tammy stood to leave. But at the door, she paused. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I've worked for Mr. Blake for 15 years. I've never seen him cry. I've never seen him touch anyone with kindness. I've never seen him look at anything the way he looked at you two last night." Emanuela looked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever he decides, it won't be because he doesn't care. It will be because he cares too much." She left, closing the door softly behind her. The girls ate in silence, each bite tasting less sweet than the last. Meanwhile, Desmond sat in his study in the main house, surrounded by papers. Reports from social workers. Information about foster families. Legal documents about guardianship. His assistant had worked through the night to compile everything. "The Morrison family seems ideal," his assistant said, pointing to a file. "Wealthy, well-respected, experienced with foster children. They have a large home, excellent schools nearby, and..." "Do they have warmth?" Desmond interrupted. His assistant blinked. "Sir? Do they have warmth? Do they laugh? Do they hug their children? Or are they just another rich family looking to tick boxes on their charity resume?" I don't know, sir." Desmond threw the file across the desk. "Then what good is any of this?" He stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. "What good is money if it can't buy safety? What good is power if it can't protect the people who need it?" His assistant stayed silent, knowing better than to interrupt. Desmond stopped at the window, looking across the property toward the guest house. "They're probably eating breakfast right now," he said quietly. "Probably wondering if this is real or just another cruel joke from a world that's already taken everything from them." "Sir, maybe you're overthinking this. Maybe the risk isn't as big as you think." "And if I'm wrong?" Desmond spun around, his eyes blazing. "If I bring them into my life and something happens to them because of me? If they get sick? If they suffer? How do I live with that?" "How do you live with sending them away?" his assistant countered gently. That stopped Desmond cold. He sank into his chair, exhausted. I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of this. His phone buzzed. The pediatric specialist he'd contacted. He answered. Yes? Mr. Blake, I've reviewed your medical history and the specific genetic condition you're concerned about. I need to be honest with you. Desmond's heart sank. How bad is it? The environmental transmission theory you're worried about, there's limited evidence for it. Most research suggests. Most isn't all. No, it's not. There's a theoretical risk, but it's estimated at less than 5%. And even if transmission occurred, the condition is manageable with modern medicine. 5%, Desmond repeated. That's 1 in 20. Sir, with respect, life is full of risks. Car accidents. Illness. Random chance. If we avoided everything with a 5% risk, we'd never leave our homes. But this is different. This would be my fault. The doctor sighed. Mr. Blake, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen parents make impossible decisions. But I've also seen children who needed love and got statistics instead. Those children rarely thrive. Desmond closed his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that those girls are facing a 100% risk of continued hardship, malnutrition, and potential danger on the streets. Against that, a 5% theoretical risk in a loving, stable home seems like a pretty good gamble. The call ended. Desmond sat in silence, the doctor's words echoing in his mind. 100% risk versus 5% risk. Certain suffering versus possible suffering. His phone buzzed again. A text from Mrs. Tammy. The girls just asked if they could see you. Sharon wants to thank you properly. Emanuela wants to know what happens next. They're trying to be brave, but they're scared. Desmond's hands shook as he read the message. He looked at the files on his desk. Perfect foster families. Safe. Distant. Risk-free. Then he looked at the bracelets on his desk. One from 30 years ago. One from yesterday. Both made with hope. Both made with love. Both made by little girls who refused to give up. His sister's voice echoed in his memory. You promised you'd take care of me forever. He had failed her. He had let fear and poverty win. He had watched her die while he stood helpless. But these girls weren't dead. They were alive. They were here. They were waiting. And he had the power to choose differently this time. Desmond stood up slowly, his decision crystallizing like ice in his chest. He walked out of his study, through the main house, across the garden. Toward the guest house. Toward two little girls who had shown him more dignity in one night than he'd seen in 30 years of business. Toward the possibility of redemption. Or ruin. He didn't know which. But for the first time in 3 decades, Desmond Blake was willing to find out. He knocked on the door of the guest house. Mrs. Tammy opened it, her eyes questioning. I need to talk to them, he said. She nodded and stepped aside. Emanuela and Sharon stood in the living room, dressed in the clean clothes that had been provided. They looked so small. So vulnerable. So hopeful despite everything. Sir, Emanuela said carefully. Thank you for the breakfast. And the rooms. And everything. We'll never forget your kindness. There was finality in her voice. She was preparing for goodbye. Desmond walked further into the room and sat down on the couch. He gestured for them to sit across from him. They did, holding hands, united against whatever was coming. I need to tell you something, Desmond began. And I need you to listen carefully. The girls nodded, barely breathing. Last night, I received some news that made me question whether it was safe for you to stay here. Sharon's face crumpled. We're leaving? Let me finish, Desmond said gently. I have a medical condition. It's rare, and it's genetic. There was concern that people living near me might be affected by it through environmental factors. The risk is small. Very small. But it exists. Emanuela's voice was steady despite her fear. How small? 5% chance. Maybe less. And if we don't stay here? What are our chances of getting sick? Or hurt? Or worse? Desmond looked at her, surprised by the question. Emanuela leaned forward. Sir, we've been living on the streets for 6 months. We've drunk water from questionable sources. We've slept in cold alleys. We've gone days without eating. What do you think our chances are of staying healthy out there? Emanuela makes a good point, Sharon added quietly. We're already at risk. At least here, if something happens, we have help. Desmond stared at them, these two incredible children who understood probability better than most adults. You're not afraid, he asked. We're terrified, Emanuela admitted. But not of getting sick. We're terrified of going back to having nothing. Of losing the first real hope we've had in months. Sharon nodded. We're terrified that you'll send us away because you're trying to protect us from something that might not even happen, while the thing that definitely will happen is us going back to the streets. Desmond felt tears burning behind his eyes. You're both very wise, he said hoarsely. We're just honest, Emanuela replied. Life is risk, sir. We learned that when our parents died. When our aunt got sick. We can't control everything. But we can control whether we accept help when it's offered. Desmond stood up and walked to the window, his back to them. The war inside him was reaching its final battle. Fear versus hope. Safety versus love. Isolation versus family. He thought about his sister. About the promise he broke. About 30 years of guilt and loneliness and cold, calculated success that meant nothing when he lay awake at night. He thought about these two girls, who had faced the worst of life and still chose dignity. Who had nothing and still offered kindness. Who deserved so much more than the world had given them. He turned around. If you stay, he said carefully, there will be rules. Regular doctor checkups. School. Responsibilities. This won't be a vacation. I'll expect you to work hard, study hard, and grow into the incredible women I know you can become. The girl's eyes went wide. If we stay? Emanuela whispered. You mean? I mean, Desmond said, his voice breaking, that I would be honored if you would let me give you a home. Not as charity. Not as guests. But as family. Sharon screamed and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Emanuela followed, tears streaming down her face. And Desmond Blake, the man who hadn't hugged anyone in 30 years, held two little girls and cried. Not tears of grief this time. Tears of hope. But then his phone rang. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Desmond pulled away gently and looked at the screen. His assistant. Urgent. I need to take this, he said apologetically. He stepped outside, answered the phone. Sir, we have a problem. Desmond's heart sank. What kind of problem? It's about the girls. I ran a background check like you asked. Just routine. But something came up. What? Their aunt. The one they said got sick and couldn't take care of them anymore. What about her? She didn't just get sick, sir. She's in prison. Desmond went cold. Prison? For what? Fraud. Embezzlement. She stole money from her employer and tried to frame someone else for it. She's serving 5 years. But the girls said. The girls probably don't know. Or they were told a simplified version. But sir, there's more. Desmond closed his eyes. Tell me. The aunt has been making calls from prison. To social workers. Claiming that once she's released, she has legal custody of the girls. She's been trying to track them down. Why would she want custody if she's in prison? His assistant hesitated. Sir, according to the social worker I spoke with, the aunt receives monthly support payments from the government for being the guardian of 2 minors. She's been collecting that money even though the girls have been on the streets. Understanding crashed over Desmond like a wave. She's using them. Yes, sir. And if she finds out they're living with you, there's a good chance she'll come after you legally. Claim you kidnapped them. Demand compensation. Cause a very public, very messy situation. Desmond leaned against the wall, feeling like the ground was falling away beneath him. So what are you saying? That I can't keep them? I'm saying it's complicated, sir. Would need lawyers. Court battles. Public scrutiny. And even then, there's no guarantee you'd win custody against a blood relative. Desmond looked through the window at the girls sitting inside, their faces glowing with happiness. They had just been given hope. And now he had to decide whether to take it away again, or fight a battle that could destroy them all. His assistant spoke again. Sir? What do you want me to do? Desmond's jaw clenched. He thought about his sister. About promises broken and promises kept. About fear and courage. About the easy choice and the right choice. Do what needs to be done, he said firmly. Hire the best family law attorneys in the country. Prepare for a custody fight. And make sure those girls never find out about any of this until we have a solution. Sir, are you sure? This could get very ugly. I don't care, Desmond said, his voice like steel. Those girls chose to trust me. I'm not going to betray that trust because things got complicated. Understood, sir. I'll start immediately. Desmond hung up and took a deep breath. When he walked back inside, he wore a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" Emanuela asked, too perceptive for her own good. "Everything's fine," Desmond lied. "Just work stuff. Now, let's talk about getting you girls enrolled in school." As they discussed plans and futures and dreams, Desmond pushed down the fear that was clawing at his chest. He had made his choice. Now he just had to hope it was the right one. Because in 3 days, the aunt would be allowed her monthly phone call. And when she found out where her meal tickets were living, all hell would break loose. The next 2 days passed like a beautiful dream. Desmond enrolled the girls in the best private school in the city. They got new uniforms, new books, new backpacks with their names embroidered on them. Sharon cried when she saw her name stitched in gold letters. "I've never had anything with my name on it before." They went shopping for clothes. Real clothes. Not hand-me-downs or donations, but brand new outfits picked out just for them. Emanuela kept asking, "Are you sure? This is too much." And every time, Desmond would reply, "It's not enough. It will never be enough." They ate dinner together every evening. Real family dinners where Desmond asked about their day and they asked about his work. Sharon would tell elaborate stories about the squirrels in the garden. Emanuela would share facts she'd learned from the books in the house library. And Desmond would listen like every word was gold. Mrs. Tammy watched from the kit Tammy, wiping tears from her eyes. "I've never seen him like this," she whispered to the staff. "He's becoming human again." But beneath the happiness, Desmond carried a weight that grew heavier each hour. His lawyers were working around the clock. Filing emergency custody petitions. Gathering evidence of neglect. Building a case. But the news wasn't good. Blood relatives have strong legal standing, his head attorney explained over the phone. Unless we can prove she's unfit, the court will likely side with the aunt once she's released. She stole from her employer and let her nieces live on the streets while collecting government money meant for them. How is that not unfit? It's complicated, Mr. Blake. The court will see that she was imprisoned, not that she abandoned them. They'll see that she has legal custody papers. And they'll see a wealthy man who took in 2 children without going through proper channels. Desmond felt sick. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we need more time. And we need the girls' cooperation. We need them to testify about their living conditions. About why they don't want to return to their aunt." "Absolutely not," Desmond said firmly. "They're children. They've been through enough. I won't put them through a court battle." "Then sir, I don't know if we can win this." Desmond hung up, feeling like the walls were closing in. He had 2 choices. Tell the girls the truth and prepare them for a fight. Or hide it from them and hope for a miracle. He chose hope. But hope, as he was learning, had a price. On the 3rd day, everything changed. Desmond was in his office when his assistant burst through the door, face pale. "Sir, she knows." Desmond's blood ran cold. "How?" A social worker mentioned it during a routine call. The aunt demanded to speak with her lawyer immediately. "She's filing for emergency custody and threatening to sue you for kidnapping." "Kidnapping? I saved them from starvation." "She's claiming you manipulated vulnerable children. That you took advantage of their desperation." "Sir, she's smart. She knows exactly how to spin this." Desmond stood up, pacing. "When?" "Her lawyer is filing the motion today. You'll likely be served papers by tonight. The court date is set for 3 days from now." 3 days. That's all he had. 3 days before a judge decided whether these girls, who had finally found safety, would be ripped away and handed back to a woman who saw them as dollar signs. "What do we do?" his assistant asked. Desmond looked out the window toward the guest house where the girls were doing homework, laughing, living like children should. "We fight," he said quietly. "We fight with everything we have." That evening, Desmond knew he couldn't hide it anymore. He called the girls into the main house, into his study. They came in wearing matching pajamas Mrs. Tammy had bought them, their faces bright with happiness. "Sir, Sharon drew a picture for you at school today," Emanuela said excitedly. "Show him, Sharon." Sharon held up a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's you, me, and Emanuela. We're a family now." Desmond's heart shattered into a million pieces. He gestured for them to sit down. They did, their smiles fading as they saw his expression. "Girls," he began, his voice heavy. "I need to tell you something important." Emanuela's hand immediately found Sharon's. "What's wrong?" Desmond sat across from them, the hardest conversation of his life ahead. "Do you remember your aunt?" The one you told me got sick. The girls nodded slowly. She didn't get sick. She's in prison. For stealing money. Emanuela's eyes widened. Sharon gasped. But more than that, Desmond continued, she's been collecting money from the government. Money that was supposed to be used to take care of you. But instead of taking care of you, she let you live on the streets while she kept the money. Tears filled Emanuela's eyes. She knew we were alone? And she didn't help us. I don't think she cared, Desmond said gently. And now she's found out that you're living here with me. She wants you back. No. Sharon screamed, jumping up. No, we won't go back. She doesn't love us. She never loved us. Emanuela pulled her sister close, her own tears falling. Why does she want us back if she doesn't care about us? Because as long as she has custody of you, she keeps receiving money, Desmond explained, his voice thick with anger. She sees you as a way to make money, not as children who need love. The room fell into devastated silence. Finally, Emanuela looked up, her young face hard with determination. What do we need to do? We need to go to court, Desmond said. We need to convince a judge that you're better off here with me than with her. But Emanuela, Sharon, it won't be easy. She has the law on her side because she's family. We have to prove that I can give you a better life. You already have given us a better life. Sharon cried. You gave us food and clothes and school and love. She never did any of that. I know, sweetheart. But the court doesn't know that yet. We have to show them. Emanuela wiped her tears and sat up straight. Then we'll show them. We'll tell them everything. About living on the streets. About making bracelets to survive. About how you were the first person in months who actually saw us as human beings. Are you sure? Desmond asked. It will be hard. There will be lawyers asking difficult questions. Your aunt might say mean things about you. About me. We're sure, Emanuela said firmly. Sharon nodded beside her. Why? Desmond asked, his voice breaking. Why would you go through all of that for me? Emanuela stood up and walked over to him. She took his hand in both of hers. Because you went through all of this for us, she said simply. You could have just given us money and sent us away. But you didn't. You gave us a home. You gave us yourself. That's worth fighting for. Desmond pulled both girls into his arms and held them tight. We're going to win this, he whispered. I promise you. I won't let her take you away. But even as he said it, fear gnawed at his heart. What if the promise wasn't his to keep? The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Lawyers filled Desmond's house, preparing arguments, gathering evidence, coaching the girls on what to expect. The media got wind of the story. Headlines exploded across the internet. Billionaire in custody battle over street children. Desmond Blake, savior or kidnapper. Aunt claims wealthy man stole her nieces. The court of public opinion was divided. Some people praised Desmond for helping children in need. Others accused him of trying to buy a family. Desmond ignored it all. He focused on the girls. He made sure they ate well, slept well, understood that no matter what happened in court, they were loved. On the morning of the hearing, Desmond stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. His hands were shaking. He hadn't been this nervous since the day his sister died. Mrs. Tammy appeared in the doorway. The girls are ready, sir. They look beautiful. Desmond turned to see Emanuela and Sharon standing in the hallway, dressed in simple but elegant dresses. Their hair was neatly braided. Their eyes were determined. They looked like warriors preparing for battle. Are you ready? He asked them. Ready, they said together. They drove to the courthouse in silence. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Blake, are you buying these children? Girls, do you want to stay with him or go back to your aunt? Is this about redemption for your sister's death? Desmond's security team pushed through the crowd, protecting the girls from the chaos. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was cold and official. They were led to a small courtroom. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, sat at the bench. On the other side of the room sat the aunt's lawyer. And beside him, the aunt. She looked nothing like Emanuela and Sharon. She was thin, her face hard and calculating. She wore a cheap suit and an expression of fake concern. When she saw the girls, she smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator. My babies, she said dramatically. I've been so worried about you. Sharon hid behind Desmond. Emanuela glared at her aunt with open disgust. The judge banged her gavel. Everyone sit down. Let's begin. The aunt's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a loving aunt who had been wrongly imprisoned, who had maintained legal custody, who desperately wanted her nieces back. Your Honor, these children belong with their family. Not with a stranger, no matter how wealthy he is. Mr. Blake may have good intentions, but he has no legal right to these children. Then it was Desmond's lawyer's turn. She presented evidence of the aunt's neglect. Bank statements showing she'd been collecting government assistance while the girls lived on the streets. Testimony from social workers who had tried to locate the children and couldn't. Your Honor, this woman saw these children as a paycheck, not as family. Mr. Blake saw them as human beings who deserved dignity and care. The judge listened carefully, her expression unreassurable. Then she spoke. I'd like to hear from the children themselves. The courtroom went silent. Emanuela stood up first. I'll go. She walked to the witness stand, small but unafraid. The judge looked at her kindly. Emanuela, I need you to tell me the truth. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Tell me about your life before you met Mr. Blake. Emanuela took a deep breath. My sister and I lived on the streets for 6 months. We made bracelets and sold them to buy food. Sometimes we went days without eating. We slept in alleys. We drank water from public fountains. We were scared all the time. And your aunt? Did she try to find you? No, Your Honor. We tried to call her once from a stranger's phone. She said she was too busy and hung up. We didn't know she was in prison. We just knew she didn't want us. The aunt's lawyer objected. Your Honor, the child is clearly being coached. I'm not being coached. Emanuela's voice rang out strong and clear. I'm telling the truth. She never cared about us. She only cares about the money. The judge raised her hand for silence. Continue, Emanuela. When I met Mr. Blake, I wasn't begging. I was trying to sell him a bracelet so I could feed my sister. He could have ignored me like everyone else did. But he didn't. He stopped. He listened. He saw us. Her voice broke. He didn't just give us money. He gave us respect. He gave us hope. He gave us a family. Tears streamed down her face. Please, Your Honor. Please don't send us back to someone who only sees us as dollar signs. Mr. Blake might not be our blood, but is more family than she ever was. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the aunt's lawyer looked uncomfortable. Then Sharon stood up from her seat. I want to say something too, she said, her small voice echoing in the quiet room. The judge nodded. Come forward, Sharon. Sharon walked to the stand, her legs shaking. But her voice was steady. I'm only 8 years old, she said. But I know what love feels like. And I know what it doesn't feel like. She pointed at her aunt. She doesn't love us. When we called her and told her we were hungry, she said she didn't have time. When we asked if we could come stay with her, she said we were too much trouble. She turned to Desmond. But Mr. Blake? He fed us. He gave us a home. He makes sure we do our homework. He reads us stories before bed. He taught me how to tie my shoes properly. He tells us we're smart and beautiful and worth something. Her voice grew stronger. I don't care about money. I don't care about big houses or fancy schools. I just want to be with someone who actually wants me. And that's Mr. Blake. She looked at the judge with tears in her eyes. Please don't make us go back to someone who doesn't love us. Please. The judge's eyes were glistening. She cleared her throat. Does anyone else wish to speak? Desmond stood up. I do, Your Honor. He walked to the stand, his heart pounding. Your Honor, I won't pretend I did everything perfectly. I should have called social services immediately. I should have gone through proper channels. But when I saw these girls, hungry and desperate but still maintaining their dignity, I saw my sister. His voice shook. My sister died when I was 14 because I couldn't save her. I've spent 30 years building an empire, but I've never felt successful. I've never felt like I did enough. He looked at the girls. Until now. These girls don't need my money. They need my time. My attention. My love. And I need them just as much as they need me. He turned back to the judge. I know I'm not perfect. I know I have a medical condition that carries a small risk. I know I'm not their blood relative. But I love them. And I will spend every day of my life making sure they know they're valued, they're important, and they're home. He took a deep breath. Please don't let bureaucracy and legality rob these children of a chance at a real family. Please. The aunt's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, we're not talking about feelings here. We're talking about law. Ms. Thompson has legal custody. Ms. Thompson also committed fraud and child neglect, the judge interrupted sharply. She collected money meant for these children while they starved on the streets. The lawyer stammered. That's under review, Your Honor. It's not under review. It's fact. The judge looked at the aunt. Ms. Thompson, do you have anything to say? The aunt stood up, trying to look sympathetic. Your Honor, I made mistakes. But I've learned. I want my nieces back. They're my family. Then where were you when they needed you? The judge asked coldly. I was in prison, Your Honor. I couldn't. You could have told authorities where they were. You could have arranged for their care. Instead, you collected government assistance meant for them while they lived on the streets. That's not a mistake. That's criminal neglect. The aunt's face turned red. You can't just give them to him. He's a stranger. He's the only one who acted like family, the judge said firmly. She looked at her notes for a long moment. The entire courtroom held its breath. Finally, she spoke. After reviewing all the evidence and hearing testimony from everyone involved, I'm making my ruling. Desmond's hand found Emanuela's. Emanuela's hand found Sharon's. They stood together, united, terrified, hopeful. The judge looked directly at the aunt. Miss Thompson, your custody rights are hereby terminated. You have demonstrated a clear pattern of neglect and exploitation. These children are better off without you. The aunt gasped. You can't do this. I just did, the judge said. Furthermore, you will be required to repay all government assistance you collected during the time these children were homeless. And you will have no contact with them unless they request it when they are adults. She banged her gavel. Then she looked at Desmond. Mr. Blake, I'm granting you emergency foster custody, pending a full adoption review in 90 days. During that time, you'll work with social services to complete all necessary paperwork and home studies. Desmond's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, the judge said, but her stern expression softened. Raising children is the hardest job in the world. Especially children who've been through trauma. There will be hard days. Days when you question if you're doing the right thing. She smiled. But I believe you'll figure it out. Because unlike Ms. Thompson, you actually care. She banged her gavel one final time. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. The aunt was screaming about appealing. Her lawyer was trying to calm her down. Reporters were rushing to get comments. But Desmond didn't hear any of it. Because Sharon had launched herself into his arms, crying and laughing at the same time. Emanuela wrapped her arms around both of them, her shoulders shaking with sobs of relief. We're staying? Sharon asked through her tears. Really staying? Really staying, Desmond confirmed, his voice breaking. Forever. Forever? Emanuela whispered, as if she couldn't believe it. Forever, Desmond repeated, looking into her eyes. You're my daughters now. And nothing will ever change that. The word daughters hung in the air like magic. Sharon burst into fresh tears. Daughters. We're your daughters. Desmond held them both tight, right there in the courthouse, surrounded by chaos, and felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years. Peace. That evening, they returned home together. Home. The word had new meaning now. Mrs. Tammy had prepared a celebration dinner. The entire staff had hung a banner that read "Welcome home, girls." They ate together, laughing and crying and talking about the future. Can we get a dog? Sharon asked excitedly. Maybe, Desmond said, smiling. If you prove you can handle the responsibility. Can I paint my room purple? Emanuela asked. Any color you want. Can we stay in the guest house or do we move to the main house? Sharon asked carefully. Desmond put down his fork. Girls, come with me. He led them through the garden, past the guest house, to the main house they'd only visited a few times. He opened the door and led them upstairs to a hallway they'd never been down. I had Mrs. Tammy prepare something while we were at court, he said. I didn't want to show you until I knew for sure we'd won. He opened two doors side by side. The rooms were beautiful. Freshly painted. One in soft lavender for Emanuela, one in sunny yellow for Sharon. New furniture. New decorations. New everything. But most importantly, on each door was a small nameplate. Emanuela Blake. Sharon Blake. The girls stared at their new names in stunned silence. If you want different last names, we can discuss it, Desmond said quickly. But I thought. He was cut off by both girls hugging him so hard they nearly knocked him over. Blake is perfect, Emanuela whispered. It's who we are now, Sharon agreed. They spent the rest of the evening exploring their new rooms, unpacking their few belongings, and planning how they wanted to decorate. Later, after both girls were tucked into their new beds, Desmond sat in his study. He took out the 2 bracelets from his desk drawer. His sister's bracelet from 30 years ago, faded and worn. And Emanuela's bracelet from a week ago, still bright and new. He placed them side by side. I kept my promise, Bella, he whispered. It took 30 years, but I finally kept my promise. I saved them. I didn't fail. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emanuela stood in the doorway in her pajamas. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head and walked over to him. She saw the bracelets on his desk. Is that your sister's bracelet? She asked quietly. Yes. Can I see it? He handed it to her carefully. She examined it with the expert eye of someone who made bracelets herself. She was talented, Emanuela said softly. Just like you said. Just like you, Desmond replied. Emanuela looked up at him. Do you think she'd be happy? About us, I mean? Desmond's eyes filled with tears. I think she'd love you both. I think she'd say I took too long, but I finally figured it out. Figured out what? That family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about keeping promises. It's about love. Emanuela smiled and hugged him. I'm glad we found you, Dad. The word stopped Desmond's heart. Dad. She had called him Dad. He hugged her back, unable to speak. Finally, he managed, I'm glad you found me too, sweetheart. She pulled back and held up the bracelet. Can I keep this? I promise I'll take care of it. Are you sure? I want to remember her. And I want to remember that even sad stories can have happy endings. Desmond handed her the bracelet. Then it's yours. She kissed his cheek and headed back to bed, clutching the bracelet carefully. Desmond sat alone in his study, looking at Emanuela's bracelet, the only one left on his desk. And he smiled. A real, genuine smile. For the first time in 30 years, Desmond Blake felt like he had truly come home. Not to a house. Not to a mansion. Not to an empire. But to a family. That night, before going to bed, Desmond did something he hadn't done since he was 14 years old. He walked into Emanuela's room, then into Sharon's room, and kissed each girl goodnight. Sweet dreams, he whispered. Sweet dreams, Dad, they whispered back. And as he walked to his own room, Desmond realized something beautiful. The word Dad didn't scare him anymore. It completed him. 2 weeks later, Desmond made a decision. He gathered Emanuela and Sharon in the garden under the afternoon sun. I want to show you something, he said. He led them to a small area near the back of the property where construction workers had been busy for days. There, rising from the ground, was a small community center. What is this? Emanuela asked. I've been thinking, Desmond said. About how you two survived. About all the other children out there who are selling bracelets, washing cars, doing whatever they can to survive. He looked at the building. This is going to be a safe house. A place where children without homes can come for food, shelter, medical care, and help. No questions asked. No judgment. Sharon's eyes went wide. Really? Really? And I want you two to help me run it. Not now, obviously. You're still children. But one day, when you're older, I want you to remember what it felt like to be invisible. And I want you to make sure no child ever feels that way again. Emanuela was crying. What are you going to call it? Desmond pulled out a sign that had been covered with a cloth. He unveiled it. Isabella's Hope, a home for every child. Below it, in smaller letters, founded by Desmond Blake and his daughters, Emanuela and Sharon Blake. His daughters, Emanuela whispered, reading the words. His daughters, Sharon repeated, smiling through tears. They stood together, the three of them, looking at the building that would help countless children. And Desmond realized something profound. He had spent 30 years trying to build an empire to prove he wasn't powerless. But real power wasn't in wealth or business or success. Real power was in showing up for 2 little girls who needed him. Real power was in turning pain into purpose. Real power was in keeping promises. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Desmond Blake stood with his arms around his daughters and felt truly wealthy for the first time in his life. Not because of his money, but because he was loved. And that night, in a mansion that finally felt like a home, 3 people who had all been broken in different ways fell asleep knowing they were exactly where they belonged. Emanuela, in her lavender room, clutching her sister's old bracelet and dreaming of the future. Sharon, in her yellow room, hugging a stuffed bear Desmond had bought her, safe and full and happy. And Desmond, in his room, with a photo on his nightstand of all 3 of them together, finally understanding what his sister had been trying to tell him all those years ago. That love doesn't die. It transforms. It finds new ways to bloom. And sometimes, when you think all hope is lost, a 12-year-old girl with a handmade bracelet walks into your life and gives you a reason to keep your promises. Not just to the past, but to the future. But really, it's just the beginning. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, subscribe and comment on the lessons learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in the next video.